All right, folks, I'll just go ahead and start with Simon. Thank you, Simon, for joining. I'll go ahead and unmute you. But I'm going to just maybe start with a brief discussion on why we're even doing this event today. Um, so I'll go ahead and make you co-host, Simon. This is such a sensitive subject, and I really, for a while now, have been struggling with how to talk about magic in the greater realm of like the world, I guess. And just to give you some background, I know that folks are going to be joining, but as I was working with plant medicine people, I would have people in the plant medicine space say that they use magic, right? But they use it in, I would say, negative ways, like Aleister Crowley kind of school of magic. And one friend had indicated to me that they had a contract with a money demon, and I had to go and like research, like, what does it mean to have a contract with a money demon? It certainly doesn't sound good. But as I was researching it, I thought, wow, this is pretty weird. Like, if you do make a contract with a demon, I feel like, I don't know, you give a piece of your soul away or something. And I was struggling because I was trying to have conversations with, hippie new agers about how in the plant medicine space, I think we should talk about magic. Like, I kind of believe in good magic. Like maybe you pray and that's like a kind of magic, or you do like a little water ceremony, or you're into astrology or new moon stuff. And so my idea of using magic is like use magic for good, like Glenda the Good Witch. And so I was struggling for a while because I felt like I kept kind of coming to these plant medicine hippie types and saying, let's talk about people using dark magic, for lack of a better word, like black magic or evil ritual. And years ago, I had kind of gone down this rabbit hole with Tracy Twyman, who unfortunately died. She was this very, very intelligent occultist, and she kind of went off in like a weird area that I'm not sure has much validity. But a lot of what she talked about was how if you look at different obelisks and things like that, or symbolism of money, or the way that cities are laid out and so forth, she would talk about like harnessing people's energy or elaborate rituals of the elite. And I always found some of her conversations quite fascinating because she did such a deep dive on history and the occult and symbolism. And I'm just kind of into creepy stuff like that, I guess. I'm also into murder and mystery shows. And sometimes I feel like the plant medicine community just wants to be happy and love and light and that kind of thing. Um, and so when the P. Diddy stuff came out, and I had gone down some deep rabbit holes with the P. Diddy stuff, I just got done watching a video about, if for those of you who know Little Kim, she was with Biggie, and she has now come out with allegations that not only Diddy did her wrong, and these are like legit news sources, but she's saying that Jay-Z did her wrong, and that these men were like pimping her out in the industry, and Foxy Brown was done wrong, like at the age of like 15. So you're talking about something that we'll call PDF to not get censored on YouTube, but we're talking about people that are, doing bad things to children, and one of the recent lawsuits against Diddy is for a 9-year-old child. So basically, this is just kind of a discussion today around, and Ankara is going to join us as well. But how do we make sense, as some of us maybe are triggered, we were maybe molested as kids, or have like a bad experience in Hollywood, and we're like, I did go to a white party. One thing that I find interesting is, I don't know if anyone pays attention to social media, but Howard Stern, um, he recently came under fire because there were all these pictures that were coming up about him being at P. Diddy white parties. And a lot of people are saying, oh, these parties don't matter, or most of Hollywood went to these parties, but like we left before like children got molested, or I don't know, crazy blood drinking happened, or who knows what, right? So this is not a conversation maybe for people who don't believe in magic, even if you think magic is bullshit. This is more a conversation for like, if you understand that magic could exist, if people were using bad ritual or negative ritual or things like that, how do we deal with that if we are being so affected by Hollywood and the morals of Hollywood? And this is not meant to like shame LGBTQ folks. Like our last event was a 24-hour event featuring LGBTQ plus voices. So in no way is this trying to shame people who like to explore or be creative or have like interesting sexual stuff behind the scenes. Like this is not, I'm not here to shame people's sexuality. What I'm here to talk about is like, what do we do if you watch the news and there's so much information coming out about really bizarre ritual that's kind of like that eyes wide shut feeling, and you're coming to your friends and you're like, this is some really crazy stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, you know, it's all probably like bullshit, none of it matters, and part of your gut is saying, this feels like it matters, this actually feels like might be some legit satanic stuff going on. How do we talk about Satanism? And so when I look into Aleister Crowley, you know, he had a huge influence on Hollywood. And there may be people out there that think it's totally cool to make contracts with money demons and stuff like that. I personally cut that friend out of my life. That was very difficult for me. But I just personally could not handle being involved with someone that was making contracts with demons and feeling like they're playing with fire. I actually, I mean, I don't know what people's religious beliefs are, but I actually do believe that demons exist. So for me, it sounds so weird because people in the plant medicine community are pretty hippy dippy, and they're like, well, why, you know, what's wrong? Why wouldn't you be friends with that person? And it's not something you can say over coffee. Like, I don't know, they have a contract with a demon, and that just felt weird. Like, so how do we have these conversations? Because I feel like we're living in this bizarro universe where demons are real, but not only that, people may be like doing really weird stuff in Hollywood, and every day we're finding out new information, whether it's about Diddy or, you know, Jay-Z or Beyonce or whoever. How do we, I think a lot of these people, they worship these people like gods. Like they think that they're not doing shady stuff and weird stuff, and that there isn't like murder or just weird sexual depravity going on. And so how do we make sense of that? So just feel free to raise your hand, but I'm going to pass the microphone over to Simon. Yeah, take it away. Let me know your thoughts.
The first place to start is, what's your definition of magic?
Well, like the friend who was doing the ritual with the demon, I mean, my understanding is I just looked at what Aleister Crowley
Well,
said.
that's an example, but what's your definition?
Um, well, magic for me, good magic and bad magic is like you're dealing with, like, for me, it's like nature, like you're dealing with the elements, like plant medicine can feel very magical. So, I
And what's wrong
ceremony.
with it? I mean, if I had to define magic, it would be something that you don't understand. If we were sitting in the African plains 1,000 years ago and somebody showed up with a helicopter, or even just, someplace that hasn't been touched by the modern world, let's say, in the Aboriginal plains or what have you, and somebody flew in with a helicopter, the helicopter would be magic. But if you're a helicopter mechanic, you understand it, look at it. If you're saying this thing exists, if you're saying there's a such thing as a money demon, which I laugh every time you say that, I can't help it. But if you're going to tell me that, like, yeah, you can do these hocus pocus type things or whatever, well, then, and if you're going to define it as nature, well, then it exists. It's nature. An acorn is nature. A frog is nature. We're nature. So these are things that exist in the world. So I would think it's just something that we don't understand. Yeah. What do you think?
And this is meant to be a conversation, so feel free to raise your hand if you want to say something. So I get a bad feeling when someone uses like I've spent a lot of time in countries that have like voodoo. Like I lived with a medicine man in Belize, and I've gone to Trinidad and Tobago. And I believe these folks are legit when they tell me that they do human sacrifice. I mean, I believe them because they're telling me they do in their culture, in the darkest part of like voodoo, in order to have something. And anyway, I watched this deep dive, and this could be just like not relevant, but a lot of these stars in Hollywood have had someone in their family, like a child or a relative that has died right before they become famous, right? So what Kanye said was that there's human sacrifice that takes place as part of like your Illuminati, whatever. And so I do think that there comes a point where you're like, if you are making a contract with a deity or some kind of spirit that has a negative energy to it, that's about like jealousy or it's about greed and it's about vengeance, I think that stuff can come back on you, kind of like that genie in the bottle idea. Like you think you're playing the genie, but I think when you're playing with demons, the genie plays you.
But what if you're praying to God for wealth or power? Or, I mean, if you read the Psalms, you'll hear things like, Lord, vanquish my enemies, raise me above those who hate me. I think some
Simon,
hand
can you,
raised.
yeah, can you check to see if someone's in the waiting room right now? Because I'm not seeing any waiting room, but my friend Noah is saying that he's in the waiting room. So just let
How do I do
anyone in,
that?
I guess, who's in the waiting
Okay.
room that I'm not seeing. Um,
I'm not sure how to do that, but let me.
okay, you go under participants and then just kind of like click on it. You can usually see people in the
Okay.
waiting room, but I don't know. Noah may, um, anyway. So yeah, does anyone else have any thoughts on magic or demons or things like that? Um, for those of like, do you have any thoughts on Hollywood, Simon? Like you have had brushes with Hollywood and fame. Do you feel like people sell their soul? Like when all these rappers talk about selling their soul to the devil, like what does that mean to you? What does that symbolism mean to you?
Well, real quick, I don't know how to do the waiting room, just FYI. Um,
Okay.
sell your soul to the devil. Well, first of all, we have to understand one thing to frame this conversation is people have very imaginative minds. Okay. You can sit here, like your friend can sit there and be like, I'm making a deal with the money demon. And he's talking to the wind. Like what makes you think you spoke to a money demon? Like, what makes you think when you pray to a God in heaven with our mind?
Yeah, you cut out
But
for
how do you really know?
you cut out for a minute there.
Okay. Sorry. What I was saying is, I'll start over. The human mind is very imaginative. It can come up with all sorts of things. When your friend says they made a deal with a money demon, how do you know they're not just talking to themselves? Like what was the money demon? Like if you close your eyes in a meditation and you see a money demon, I'll take it a step further. Let's say for those of us that have had deep meditations and we've seen beings and deities and entities coming, does that mean the entity came into your subconscious, or did your subconscious create an entity, right? That's a question about ayahuasca. People will see entities and beings and things in ayahuasca. Well, does that mean a being that wasn't you came and spoke to you? Or was there something latent in your subconscious that you brought up? Like if you see an angel come speak to you, well, you have a kind of a conception of what an angel looks like. You've seen that in movies and books and Dungeons and Dragons games. So did you come up with the angel? I mean, these are questions that we don't really yet have answers to. You could hypothesize. Um, Meaning like, how do you know your friend was even talking to a money demon? Like, you know, uh, if I tell you like Elvis comes and speaks to me, did Elvis come and speak to me? Well, I feel it. I see it. He was there. I saw him. Like the mind is very imaginative. For someone who thinks they're Napoleon, are they Napoleon? Well, he thinks he's Napoleon, right? So part of this could be chalked up to that. Yeah.
Yeah, Noah, did you want to say something? I just unmuted you.
Thank you. I think that you're completely right, except I think it's the wrong dosage that they're on, or the wrong type of mushrooms, or whatever their hallucinogenic of choices. If they've seen something that most people cannot relate, they're just not sharing the right hallucinogenics.
Well, let's say it's even they're not on anything. Let's say somebody, you know, George W. Bush says that God spoke to him. When he would make a decision, he would go and he'd pray to God and God would speak to him. Well, did God speak to him? Or, if you sit there and you say, God, what should I do next? And an answer comes to you. Did God send you that answer? Or did you know the answer and you prompted yourself in this manner? I guess that's what I'm saying, like you don't know, we don't know like where things come from per se.
Okay, just for context though, Ice Cube had given an interview recently where he said in the early 90s, and I don't know if you remember the early 90s, but I remember the early
I,
90s. I remember the early 90s, and rap had changed quite a bit. Like Ice-T had like the Cop Killer album out, and that was like a very popular album, but then it got like banned
I
and
wasn't in the early 90s though.
late
That
90s.
was later.
Okay. But my point is that Ice Cube talked about how some organization, whether it was like the CIA or whoever, but like the same people that own the music industry, they own the prison industrial complex. And what Ice Cube said is that, no, that's legit, Simon. That's totally legit. Look it up.
Okay, he said it. What does it mean he said it?
He said that they changed the nature of the music to become like more aggressive and misogynistic and like getting blacks to exhibit violence towards other blacks and to be misogynistic towards women. And I did see the rap become very like aggressive towards women. And he said it was to perpetuate violence, between black people and misogyny. So
Well, he did it. He was the one that did it. So is he saying that he came and he the dark force that did this misogyny? Like he can't come and make that statement in a third person. He doesn't have the right to come and say, "Oh, other people came and did this." No, but you did this.
well, but I think
You made
he's
America's Most Wanted. You made fuck the police.
yeah, I think he's saying that there were powers behind the scene that were like, we don't want you to like make rap like more like Tupac's rap, that was more about like kind of Bob Marley vibes, like social
Not
justice.
really. Tupac had a ton of gangster rap. You know, his one of his first single he ever released before even people knew Tupac. He was rapping behind a jail cell. He was always like that. When he was with Digital Underground, he wasn't. You know, um, here's the reality, and I hate to say this, but conscious rap never sold. X Clan, they didn't sell. Um, who else? Poor Righteous Teachers, they didn't sell. But when you came out with gangster rap, it sold. So people bought it. Did anybody influence the person to drive to the mall and buy the CD? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, it's like what sells? Sex sells, violence sells, you know. In comedy, it has to be dysfunctional or there's no joke. You can't get up and stand up comedy and be like, man, my life's great, my yacht's amazing, my wife loves me, my kids are successful. No one's gonna laugh. It has to be my wife hates me, I'm fat, I'm this, my life, I can't do this right. Comedy's dysfunctional. That's what people want.
So have you watched the Menendez brothers, the show out right now at all, covering them?
No.
Okay, so I don't want to give too much away, but basically it alludes to the fact that in Hollywood there was ritualized sexual abuse of these young boys, kind of like the Spartan theory, where like in the Spartan army theory, if all the men have sex with one another, and it bonds them against the enemy, so it's not about sex, it's about like energy or something. But in the Spartan, they're like
Mm.
it's not gay, it's like something else. They would match
Something
young
to
boys
toughen them up.
they would match boys with older men that are they're like it would seem like a perpetrator. So people are saying like Bieber and Diddy, like that kind of thing, that in Hollywood, Menendez brothers, their dad was like a major record label person, and he and his brother, the brothers are saying that the father molested them, but also a bunch of other kids in like Menudo and stuff like that, that Latino band. And so now those people, those adults are coming out saying that, yes, indeed, these Hollywood producers were like molesting these little kids. um I'm just saying, like, asking, like, what do you think about all these people that are like, whoa, like, we're finding out all of our heroes, right, may have been doing something kind of sinister if they're linked with these Diddy parties, if they're linked with these um
Corey
Diddy's.
Feldman. Corey Feldman came out a long time ago, and
Right.
he got blasted for it.
He got blasted for it. But are we contributing to that as a society? Because, like, what are we doing, like, to help the Corey Feldmans? Like, I don't know if you remember Corey Haim, but
Yeah.
I always felt bad for Corey Haim because I believed that he was sexually abused when he was in Hollywood as a young star, and so I feel bad. Margaret, if that's who if the Margaret who joined is the Margaret who I think it is, then it's our friend Margaret.
Oh,
Um,
hey.
yeah, and I just wanted to update her on where we're at. And we're just basically talking about ritual and sexuality in Hollywood. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you.
So,
Who else is there? I just saw your invitation,
oh,
so I don't know.
it's Simon and I, but then Noah's on the phone and Jesse and some other people are on the call.
Okay, great.
But we were just kind of getting people's perspectives on what does it mean to have the Diddy stuff come out, and finding out, like, maybe Justin Bieber was molested, and like,
Oh, for
and
sure,
just,
for
you know,
sure.
all these people that are now, you're seeing like the veil get pulled back. And
Yes,
what does it mean if people are participating in ritual that's kind of like Aleister Crowley type stuff? So
yes.
I gave the example of a friend of mine that I cut off because she said she was working with a money demon, right? And I personally just felt like this feels like a little bit like dark energy to me.
Oh.
I'm into magic from a perspective of, like, let's look at astrology, or let's do a
Mm-hmm.
water blessing or something like more Native American kind of magic. But I'm not
Mm-hmm.
into let's curse people or take their blood energy or demons. Nothing, no contracts with demons for me. So I'm
Good.
just curious. Yeah, Simon and I were just kind of talking about what does it mean to feel like people are grappling with, like, even the Menendez brothers, they came out about their dad having done all these like kind of ritualized sexual abuse stuff with Menudo and other kind of boy
Hmm.
groups. And so
Who
even
are
if,
the Menendez? Who are the Menendez brothers?
oh,
They
they
killed their
murdered.
parents in the 90s, I think.
Yeah, they were from like Hollywood, but they were like super wealthy, and everyone just thought that they killed their parents for
Oh,
no reason.
oh, yes, right. Yeah,
Well,
I remember that.
one way I look at some of this stuff, like the Michael Jackson and the Harvey Weinsteins and all of these people, is there's two things we have to understand about human nature. One is that what do you do when you have everything, right? For the person who wants to go out for fame and fortune and money, what happens when you have the yacht and the mansion and everybody knows you? Like, take Bill Cosby, right? Bill Cosby could have slept with anybody. He didn't have to drug people. He could have gone out and women would have fallen at his feet. But he can already have that. R. Kelly already has that. I mean, like, there's a part of human nature, if it's always more, if you're constantly striving for more money, more fame, more power, you reach a point where, like, where do you go next? I've had all the women, I've had all the filet mignon, I've had all the champagne, I've had all the yachts. And I think that's one of the things, in my opinion, that drives them into, like, the other stuff. Because now you're in the taboo, right? Like, even like you could probably, if we're honest, we could think in our own lives, like, there's something sexy about the taboo, right? The forbidden fruit, right? So there's that aspect, I think. I think there's also another aspect, um, in that, uh, just like we can say that people, as on average, people that tend to go to church every Sunday and don't have sex until they're married and they're very right. tend to be very conservative in their lives. They're not at parties, they're not drinkers, they're people that go to bed early, they get up early, right? They mow their lawn, they iron their clothes, like they tend to be more conservative. We also have to understand that people that tend to be artistic tend to be sexually free in a way that the conservative Christian might not be, right? So there's this balance between sexuality and art, right? And it's possible that the balance for many of these people gets blurred throughout time, and that, right, like Yul Brynner slept with all these women. What's his name that played Dick Tracy? Warren Beatty slept with all these women. Well, there's something about the artist that's sexually free, the libertine, right? And I think that gets them in a lot of trouble as well. I guess I'm making a case of this can happen with no magic. It's just human nature, some of this stuff.
Right. And there might be people that don't believe in magic or dark magic or rituals and stuff like that. I guess where I'm struggling is I'm a victim of childhood sexual abuse, and I'm watching our conversation on a national level, and I'm seeing all these different threads. Like the friend recently who I kind of felt like I had to cut off because they're working with, demons or whatever. For me, it felt like dark energy, for lack of a better word. That thread seems to come in when I look at the occult and Hollywood and Aleister Crowley's influence. And then I feel like I'm coming up against these tough conversations because I'm talking to friends that maybe they can't believe that P. Diddy was doing bad stuff with children, right? Or maybe they can't believe that maybe in Hollyweird there might be some really weird, like sexual rituals going on with kids or God knows what, that we can't.
Artists are weird. Yeah, but artists are weird sexually oftentimes anyways.
Yeah. But as
may I interject with
yeah,
something?
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, forgive me because I'm coming in late, but it seems to me that if you're talking about P. Diddy and Epstein, you're talking about blackmail at a very high level. You're talking about a system of blackmail that has been going on for centuries, but just now is technologically, out of this world. I mean, you can videotape and record and surveil and have all this information. Plus, you have pornography just at so readily available. But that's the way they control people. And so the people who are high up in any industry, particularly Hollywood, let's use that as an example, but you could use many other industries as well, banking, politics, and just anything. The people at the very, very top who we don't know their faces because they're ugly. So they have puppets that look like Gavin Newsom and Pierre Trudeau and Macron, these beautiful faces, very appealing looking, but those aren't, or even, Kamala Harris, they don't have, these are not the people coming up with the thoughts. These are compromised individuals, I believe. Oh, thank you. Her name's Dahlia. These are compromised individuals who are now puppets. And so P. Diddy was compromised. Epstein was compromised. And I believe, they decided to go over to the other side where they could have power and money, and a lot of things were promised to them. But it was because they were sexually compromised, I'm guessing. And
Well, power corrupts.
you don't think P. Diddy was compromised?
No, I'm just saying power in general corrupts.
No, I'm reading the the text.
On one hand, power corrupts. On the other hand, think of the type of person that wants to conquer the world, right? Like what would take an Alexander the Great, right? What would
But Simon, you are trying to make a human argument. You're trying to make a human argument for why bad things happen. And I think it is better to reverse engineer from the top down rather than from bottom up.
Well, are they not human?
Maybe not.
Well, I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I think I think, you know, we're talking, I believe we're talking about Satan. And so if just what is coming down from evil, it is infecting people who do, we do have free will. I mean, we have choices, but people are choosing to do things, and then they get cornered, and then they get compromised, and then they want, you know.
Well, you know, Leo earlier talked about the rape that would happen in the Spartan army. Like part of your initiation into the Spartan army was you got raped by an older general. Okay, horrific, horrible, right? But we also have to understand, if we're looking back on it with our historical caps on, that this was also a society that didn't believe in pedophilia like we do. In India, in certain parts of the
They
Islamic,
didn't believe in it, meaning they didn't what?
meaning
What do you mean they
in
didn't
our
believe in it?
society, we believe that the age of consent is 18, right? There are places right now today in parts of the Middle East, the Near East, where you can get a 3-year-old bride. I mean, it makes
You can
for
get
us.
that in, you can get that in the United States because the CIA and our government is sex trafficking children.
Okay, but I'm just saying, not even, I'm saying out in the open. There are cultures that accept that. So
Okay.
we also have to understand that
So
we
what are
live.
you saying? What are you saying about the difference of the cultures? What are you
I'm
saying?
just saying that throughout human history, there are lots of times, there are different authors. Um, Dr. John Money, who helped create trans theory in 1979, believed that he didn't believe in pedophilia like that. There are
Well,
people
these are
like,
compromised pedophiles. I mean, these are just
sure, in America,
disgusting people.
yes, but in America, where we all believe, and I think it's safe to say everyone on this conversation believes, because we're American and we're good people, that you shouldn't marry a 3-year-old. Had we been born in certain other cultures that are still existent today, or had we been in ancient Greece, we wouldn't have that.
Simon,
are
we
you
are
saying?
all people know in their hearts that that is wrong.
Not true. Not
Okay.
That
true.
is, it is
Ancient Greece
wrong.
did not have, there are many periods where they did not have the same views that we have. And there are
Okay.
obviously,
But
and
Simon, I think what you're saying is that there's men in this world or women that are so high powered or whatever, they can marry like a 7-year-old and they're like 70 and it's considered culturally normal somehow.
yes, I'm saying there are
Right.
places where it's
And what
culturally normal.
Margaret is saying is that any person in their right mind knows that that's fundamentally wrong. And you're saying, I don't know that every person knows that that's
Yeah.
fundamentally wrong. Because some of these
They
people,
obviously don't think it's fundamentally wrong because
they've
they're out in public
culturally,
with their.
right, they've culturally accepted it. So I do want to point out that I disagree with Jeremy, and I wanted Jeremy to have a chance to talk if he wanted to, but Jeremy had said that he didn't think that Jay-Z or Clive Davis had set up P. Diddy for this fall, right? Because he's been doing this for like 30 years, right? These white parties. He's been
Yeah. Well, also, do you guys remember the shooting in the club that happened in the '90s with him? Like,
right.
I mean, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
rumors about him setting up like his star artist, Notorious B.I.G. I mean, this is like hardcore underground mob shit. It's like he's been doing this forever. I mean, the same with Jay-Z. They use their power and intimidation to kind of keep themselves in a stronghold. I mean, fuck, what do you think the beef between Kendrick Lamar and Drake was? Like, I mean, Kendrick Lamar literally had an entire Amazon special saying we need to get all these industry folks out of there. It's not surprising because it's just nice to see justice kind of being served and people actually being able to do something about it. But it sucks that it was like that it was so widespread. That's all I'm getting at. It's that it's old news just recycling, and maybe we're digging a little deeper.
Well, you're making an interesting point too, because Jay-Z was a crack dealer in New York City before he became a rapper. And there's that famous saying, like you could take the man out of the hood, but you can't take the hood out of the man. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like I mean, there's another conspiracy theory that kind of got brought up with his friend Big L, who was a rapper who was 20 times better than him. He was on like this freestyle back in the 90s. And I know, and I think Big L was getting higher and higher and higher. And I'm pretty sure Jay-Z saw the claim to fame and just murdered him. I mean, also, how many like soap operas do we have about, especially in high society, where everybody's honor is like on their sleeve, and if they get embarrassed, then they have to go and get back to the other person and murder them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just personally not shocked when I hear all this crazy shit come on.
Okay, but I like to see all different perspectives, and there's been some coverage of the fact that some folks are saying that P. Diddy got too big for his britches. Like he was doing this sex trafficking or whatever for 30 years, but then why he got caught, right? Now all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, this guy's doing bad stuff, right? But if you look at his houses in Miami and stuff, he had like a boat right in front, like he had whatever, like when you have a dock and everything. He had like places where these boats would just pull up and unload whatever, and he would load whatever. And he didn't seem to get busted for trafficking potentially humans and drugs. So you have to wonder, where was the government for 30 years? And a lot of people are saying his dad had connections with the CIA, and that he and Tupac were part of what I mentioned earlier about like that kind of CIA thing. Because there's a video out there of Tupac looking really gay, that he was like a gay actor.
But Leo, how long did it? On the flip side, how long did it take the U.S. Pablo Escobar and all the cartel members? I don't know. Like they're building a case and building evidence so they can just go and be like, you're fucked.
I think who knows? But I do think some people said that Epstein was a Mossad agent. So the reality is I think a lot of
listen, man. Some people say lots of things. Some people say dinosaurs didn't exist. Right. Like we can't go off what some people say. Like we have to, you know what I'm saying?
There's
like,
credible evidence.
Don't buy beepers from Assad, man. Don't buy them from Israel. Unless you want to be like Hezbollah.
So there actually are credible books out there about that, Simon, if you want to check it out. But my point more is like, I think they have these people working for them and know that they're out there. But at the same time, what people say, if you follow this particular rabbit hole, is that not Jay-Z, but P. Diddy, he came up against like Ciroc, whatever that big wine alcohol business is. And he wanted, if you research it, Ciroc, is that what it's called? Ciroc. Okay, I'm just not super familiar with it, but if you research it, he was coming up against them hard, and he wanted like double what they were going to give him. And he also wanted to start, and this is just another theory, he also wanted to start a Black political party. So I'm not saying he's not corrupt and hasn't done all these bad things, but I kind of wonder like what some Black influencers are suggesting is that he got too big for his britches, right? Like if these are like the slave holders operating like the hip hop industry or whatever, then they were like, nobody, you can't start either a Black political party or start asking for more money in this deal with Ciroc or whatever. So now he was going to sue Ciroc, if you look it up.
Well, that's kind of what I said earlier, is power corrupts. And for these people who have everything, it's like the mind seeks, we want more. But what do you do when you've had every woman, you have every yacht, you have every mansion? Either A, if you're a good person, you might go into philanthropy, or if you're not a good person, you might go into a Harvey Weinstein route. You know what I'm saying? Like they say, like money doesn't make the man, it reveals the man. So if you got a bad character on a small level, when you're a gazillionaire, you're going to have a bad character on a global level.
I agree with that last statement, Simon. I mean, when you mentioned that if you're a good person, you go from having it all to the philanthropy, I think your last statement is more true, that these are people who have bad character. And then when they get to that higher level, then they go into philanthropy, and it doesn't make them a good person.
And then here's the other thing is my son, I was trying to get him into media. And can you hear me? My son, I was trying to get him into media, right? And he got to be on a TV show and all these other things. And I wanted him to go into that world, right? and maybe he wouldn't have been able to make it because maybe the conditions to get into that world are really shady. Like that's why all these people in music are talking about like selling their soul and stuff. Like I just think
What do you think of Russell Brand going from that shady world and, you know, a self-described hedon, and, you know, he's so eloquent about his about everything, but it's interesting that he has seen it from that side, and now he is a born again Christian and supporter, and a very very interesting, I think, commentator.
let me just unmute.
Yeah, I mean,
Noah wanted to say something, I think. So if we could give Noah a chance. Sorry. Noah, are you able to speak?
Yeah, we're just enjoying listening to. Yes, we're just enjoying listening to you all. And it's interesting to say that there's so many different points of view and so many different aspects, and to say that like powerful agencies are involved is they have to manipulate these agencies and use them for their own benefit. For example, you can always be using any governmental agency in this country to give them information, being pretty much a snitch for them or inside informer for them. In return, they pretty much pardon you from all your sins, so you can sin as much as you want.
yeah, look at what's his name, the Boston mob boss, Whitey Bulger. He got a free pass for years because he was a informant for the FBI. He was a mob boss. And
that's to say that all these people get away with stuff for 20, 30 years, let's say with bringing stuff through Florida there. It could be that, as they say, they're putting a blind eye to that because they're giving them some inside information about some drug mule in Miami or something.
They want a bigger fish.
Or they just giving them enough information to keep them off of their business.
Yeah, that's a possibility too.
So that could be why it took 20 years, is just to get through the red tape of the agency that's protecting them. So that could be part of the case too.
Yeah, I don't know. The timing feels strange. Like I feel like we're all like on the cusp of something big, like just like weird energy in the air. Like why is all of Hollywood failing? Like every day I'm reading about new people that we all thought were like golden children. And I know that Jessie made a comment that these are not her heroes or whatever. They're not necessarily my heroes either, but they're my friends' heroes. Do you know what I mean? My friends don't want to hear when I say, oh, look,
but that's because we don't educate. We have to remember that education is upon us and our next generation. It's upon us to learn. It's to learn of when you're build your self-confidence up enough to where you're able to sit on top of a mountain and just meditate and find your own truth. Nobody can shake you off that mountain. Nobody can bring you to worship anyone else. You can appreciate certain things that other people do, but you'll never worship anyone if you know your true self. So that's upon us to educate each other, including ourselves, not to look up at others, but to do upon others as our, how you call it, is our, not the tradition, but as our actual conscience dictates that this world should be lived by. And
I think Jesse's raising her hand too, just so you know. When no,
yeah, go ahead. We can't see it because we're on the phone, so I'm sorry. But we just want to say that education is something that we have to learn about ourselves. Look inwards, not so much outwards. When we create all these idols, we create new gods. Every religion talks about, other than the how you call it, the many god religions, but most single god religions tells you avoid these idols, avoid these demigods. And we pretty much have to remember that we are the point of perspective of our life. We can't see it from too many other ways. We can try and relate to it, but we can't see anything but through our own eyes.
I think that's very beautiful. That's very beautiful. Do you mind just hanging in there for a second, Noah, so we can hear from Jesse?
Of course.
Hi. I think there are a lot of things being touched on here that could use a lot more actual data. And the first thing that I'll say is that this is an unfortunate perspective of data that I've had to teach many times in my career. And it is the fact that if we were to evaluate, if we go through the statistics of who is the foremost person to molest children, and we'll go specifically with young men, with little boys. The foremost person to molest them is someone who identifies as straight, is usually identified as monogamous, is usually married, and is most of the time a white male in a position of power. All of this speaks to a huge level of problematic things that tend to loop all the way back around to the toxic expectations of masculinity and the control that patriarchy has reaped on other people's lives. And when I say the toxic expectations of masculinity, I say that because this system harms men first. It harms boys first. The harm that is reaped on them is what they turn around and recreate in the culture. And there are statistics in every realm of abuse that show all of these things to be connected. That's one thing. A separate thing is kind of along the lines of what Noah is saying is related to worship and stuff, is what's going on with parasocial relationships. Parasocial relationships have existed as long as people have sought after beings or characters or existences that do not have a direct relationship with them. I don't adhere or believe in parasocial relationships, and as a consequence, I have never been comfortable or taken any personal level of interest in any type of deity worship. You have to have an understanding.
What is
parasocial relationships?
So it's a very interesting thing to read about. It's really important to understand in the sociology of where we're at with people's relationship with social media and media in general. A parasocial relationship is basically, in the shortest version, someone who is obsessed or overly committed to someone who is pedestaled, who likely does not even know that they exist. And it doesn't have to be someone that they don't know exists, because you can be aware of a parasocial relationship happening with, say, a stalker or a fan who is obsessive. And it could be said that the earliest form of parasocial relationships is people believing in a god or gods. That is, in that case, it is a person that is not manifest necessarily, right? So the most consistent example or utilization of parasocial relationship structure is with someone who is a content creator of some kind, or who is pedestaled in some kind of a way, and people worship them or overly magnify that person in their lives so much more than is actually relevant. If we could have entertainers and musicians and artists that were people that we understood that they are creatives, and maybe they have ended up on a magnified scale in some kind of a way because of income or privilege or whatever it is that they've come across, but to understand that all of these people are still doing a job this is very important for us to keep track of. And the fact that that has been so far left behind is some of how we end up with these people on pedestals so high up that they have lost track of what day-to-day living is like for most people, is why they have lost track of what is the normal need for receiving care and attention for your mental health concerns. They isolate each other into these fairy tale lands of abuse as a consequence of multiple systems that are at play, helping them get to that place. And by that point, it is more an issue of class and finances than it is an issue of venue or genre or any of those things, because the money is what protects them from consequences. And the only difference, because statistically, there are not a different number of molestations happening from people in higher classes than there are from lower classes. And that illusion of dignity or money is what prevents people from being able to be identified and punished sooner. It is sheerly their separation as a consequence of their income. So that the pervasiveness of pedophilia in our cultures and others as well is through and through. It is so much more common than anyone wants to believe, which is why I think that we have a culture that also is so willing to out loud and violently, verbally put down pedophiles, because there's so many people who you trying to convince buddying, like she doth protest too much. It is because there are so many people who have pedophilic inclinations, whether it has been taught into them or it was born of them authentically, which this is a real thing that has also been researched. It's present, and we have a culture that reinforces it. And no different than how, Simon, you were talking about how
pedophilia?
Maybe you get, sorry?
Our culture reinforces pedophilia? No, I don't think so. I think everyone
subcultures, like satanic ritual abuse,
It doesn't even have to be something so sensational as that. We have a ton of infantilization of women. We have over-sexualization of children at younger and younger ages. We have competitions that put children in conditions to be competitive and selling themselves as a better piece of property than other children. Like, these things are being taught at earlier and earlier ages. It's why we have higher suicide rates. It's why we have younger and younger prevalence of eating disorders. And this is across gender. This is not anyone in particular. These impacts are being felt by children at a younger and younger age all of the time. So the numbers of these pedophilic consequences are ever present. And if you don't know about them, Simon, I would say that is a consequence of being in a privileged position to not have to be exposed to them.
It's not American culture, it's human nature. And here's the thing, you say, oh, well, white men are the ones committing the majority of the pedophilia. In America, where 70% of the population is white, yeah. Go to Nigeria. Are white men the number one pedophiles? This is a human problem. It's not an American problem.
100%. And that's actually in agreement with what you were talking about in ancient standards, of that pedophilia, that framework didn't exist at that time. Us now, we may disagree and have made structural choices that most people agree with, that we don't think that that's okay, and all of the reasons that we don't want it to happen anymore. And it has existed through and through. It is why we have cultures now, and why there have always been cultures that is literally just not the water they swim in. They also didn't have a word for bisexual at that time. It wasn't a thing. That framework didn't exist. And so as we proceed and decide to make these choices and draw these lines about what we consider to be acceptable or not, we have to work deeper than that. Rather than just saying this is bad, punish them, we have to work deeper into these problems and reverse engineer how it's happening in the first place. And
So
none of this
Education. It's
pop
always
culture stuff is going to
education.
solve any of those problems. Talking about what's happening with all of the famous people is not going to solve these problems. We have to address these things at the root on an average level, on the day-to-day people that we interact with all of the time. That's where it matters to heal these things. The pop culture shit ultimately is on a completely different scale than any of the rest of us will ever experience.
yeah. And another thing too, where you were talking about, parasocial, whatever, putting people on pedestals. So for all of history, we worshiped the king and the queen and the nobility. And they walked through town in their wagons, and we all lined the streets and bowed before them and sire. And people wanted to know, even today, people want to know, oh, who's Prince William doing and this and that. So we have that within us. And we now live in a society that's got rid of kings, queens, and nobility. And it's almost as if we've replaced them with these new nobility. And just like if you go back to the nobility of France and England and you learn their histories, they're murdering everyone, assassinating everyone, molesting everyone. They're doing all these shady things. It's almost as if we've transferred that same energy onto the pop stars, I feel.
Leo, you're
Yeah, I'm muted. We're supposed to end at 7, which is in 2 minutes, but I'm willing to go over 5 minutes because it's just such a robust conversation. But everything that Jesse was bringing up was kind of like really resonating a lot with me in terms of looking at the greater culture, seeing how we do have a problem like on a broader level. But I'm just wondering, for me, I'm not feeling great as we're having these conversations. Like, I'm not feeling more empowered as someone who is a survivor of childhood abuse. Like, I'm not sure how to help people that are probably triggered by these conversations, even if you don't identify with these gods that are these powerful people. I feel like one thing that kept us going in our drudgery in this world was we thought that these people, we could become like them. And now we find out that there's maybe secret ways of navigating that world that are quite harrowing and disgusting. And so now what happens when we don't want to be part of that world, when it disgusts us, right? I feel like what keeps us going at the end of the day is like, if you watched Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, it's like you might find that golden ticket in your fucking chocolate bar, right? So I feel like all of us in the drudgery of our lives, they kind of sold us this lie, whether it was the nobility or now the new nobility is the stars from Hollywood. But like, if all this nobility is falling, I feel like there might be revolution because the people are like, oh, fuck, there was never any golden ticket. Like now we find out there was never a golden ticket. So just wondering if anyone has any thoughts as we
Another thing
wrap
we have to
up.
backtrack, and well, I just want to say one more thing. We're talking about Hollywood as if it's one person. Hollywood is tens of thousands of people. 50,000 people are involved in Hollywood. And we're talking about maybe 5 or 6. So we also have to like give them a little slack here and realize that there's there's no evidence that the majority of them are doing this stuff.
I
I think there's some evidence.
There's actually every day Ashton Kutcher now is there's a new thing about Kanye that he was trafficking through Adidas and through these other companies, and that was a lawsuit that was 40 pages that just got dropped yesterday.
Yeah, but if you turn on the TV at 6 in the morning and you watch it till 6 in the morning the next day, there are 20,000 people that went into those episodes, from the actors, the grips, the casting directors, the producers. So I'm not willing to just say Hollywood is raping people. There are powerful people that have abused their power, but I'm not willing to go all the way to say that like all of them. There's way more than we're counting. I think Jesse's raising her hand.
Oh, sorry. Let's make sure. That might be still, hold on. So if anyone else has anything to say, it sounds like Jesse's going to speak. And then Lovely, if you had anything, or Margaret or Jeremy or Noah, to just like end us off. But just letting people express themselves. We're not going to solve all these issues today. This is all kind of exploding in the world today. But just I really appreciate the honoring of those who've, suffered, and people that are probably pretty triggered. I appreciate the gravity of the conversation, and that I don't have anything else to share. It's just great to hear people's perspectives.
What Simon is saying is 100% correct. And one of the correlations that I was trying to make along the lines with understanding parasocial relationships and pedestaling people and what social media has done to our perception of the world is that we think that this is only happening at this scale in those higher places. Just because those people have a greater level of access as a consequence of their funds and having multiple homes everywhere, it is not more persistent in those spaces. These abuses are happening at every level of culture all of the time. It is happening on the street that every one of you are living on right now. It is happening to somebody that you go to work with every day. It is happening to children that are going to show up to school tomorrow morning and hope that they have the support from their teacher that they get every other day. It is all of the time. So that's what I'm saying about this pop culture stuff. Like, it's a problem, but it's a problem because they have been pedestaled so readily. The real work, the real stuff that's worth investigating is how to help ourselves heal and to understand that it is not just them. It is only more magnified because it's a specific industry that we all depend on for entertainment. It is everywhere. It is all the time.
Jesse, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Isn't it true that most molestation happens with someone within the family, or that the family knows?
Correct.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
And
that has continued to be the case for generations. Like, this is the thing, like, that I'm putting across is like, this is not new. It is not some pivotal time. It's not something retrograde. It is literally all of the time. And the fact that our exposure is a consequence of videos being available to everybody all the time, and the record and the exposure, like, it's happening in the way that it is right now in a specific industry because there is somewhat of a domino effect, because people need to start protecting themselves when everyone else is being blackmailed or whenever everyone else is trying to save their own ass. It's not that there's something significant happening in that regard, other than that some very pivotal key players have been attacked. And this is, all of the reasons that Epstein is dead and all of those things. But it's all of the time. We need to deal with these things on a day-to-day level, on our level of existence, and not give so many shits about what's happening so high up. And I say this as a person who was sex trafficked as a child, who stayed in sex work as an adult because I didn't think that I had any other choices. I am a counselor now. I work with people who have been through all of these things. I even work in mental health with people who are pseudo-famous as a consequence of the social media presence. It's not a unique thing. We need to look for it everywhere else instead of just on the TV. That's who we really need to be listening to, in my opinion, which is not often so humble.
And also finding trying to intervene, because most of the people that go molest people were molested as a kid a lot of times. So there's a lot of kids. I mean, we could stop that. We could nip this in the bud if we do what Jesse's saying and we get a kid help before he has the ability to turn into what we now call a monster.
One thing I was going to add that I forgot to add earlier is that when I was a CPS worker, we would never go to Mercer Island, which is where the 1% live in Washington State. We would never go and investigate those homes, and we would never go investigate allegations of child abuse, sexual abuse, like any kind of physical abuse, neglect. And it always made me sad, because I do realize that we were often just sent to the ghetto, like sent to the poorest families. And often they were families of color. And I do think everything Jesse was saying about like that wall of wealth, that I actually feel incredibly guilty for all those kids that probably no one ever knew how bad things were, because Mercer Island it's kind of like its own little weird utopia unto itself. And so I feel almost like worse for some of those kids, because like the Menendez brothers story, if your whole family like keeps it a secret, and you're just, no one would believe you because your family is like too perfect or something. I just think that can be very hard. Was there anyone else that wanted to share before we end? Like, anything? Thank you so much for all of the good, deep shares.
I guess, Leo, I would say that Jesse probably would have more to say in response to what you just said. But my thought is, of course, it's tragic if any child is suffering from abuse and it's not being helped. But my thoughts on CPS is that it's a government organization that does channel the many children into sex trafficking by taking them from their parents. And so I think that the people on Mercer Island are protected from that, even
Yeah,
if they may not be getting
yeah,
interventions.
yeah, no, I definitely look back now and see all the kids that ended up in sex trafficking that were teen clients that I saw through CPS. So I totally see that sense of that can be a route for sex trafficking for these children. And that pulling them from homes is often like worse and more sinister than providing opportunities for families to get out of poverty and things like that. But I'm just saying, like, I don't know who helps those really wealthy children, right? If CPS is like not trustable, but also like, I'm just saying, I don't know that those kids often, like, people think their lives are perfect. So I don't know who would check on those children if they were being abused in terms of, we don't look to those families, kind of like these wealthy people or these stars that we're trying to put up on pedestals. I just don't think we imagine that bad stuff's happening in their families, just like Jesse was saying, happen in families down the street from us. But we've somehow not had our eyes on those families, but I think it's just everywhere.
I think we all have to look after our own communities. And Jesse was saying that. And so the best people to help with the Mercer Island people are
Mercer
other
Island
people
people.
on Mercer Island.
What's up,
You know?
Mercer Island people? Jeremy, did you want to say anything or Lovely before we end? Does anyone want to stay in touch? There's some folks here that maybe they want to put their information, like their website or their email, or if they feel like being contacted or something. It's just nice sometimes to make friends because I do feel like folks are going to need support as they grapple with these things on a cultural level. Jeremy, did you want to add anything, or Noah?
No, I mean, apparently it's just starting to hit the fan with all the controversies, but I don't think it's going to trickle down to us until post election.
Okay.
I guess I would like to just say on a more positive note that I do think it's positive what's happening, because the more that is revealed, it's getting people talking. I mean, like Jesse was saying, I mean, this is happening everywhere. It has always been happening. And I think people are talking about sex trafficking now. And right, the veil is lifting. And that's a very positive thing.
Yeah, no, for me, it feels very taboo because I always joke about the fact that you have bumper stickers that say, like, my son is like an autistic student or my son is an honors student, but no one ever says, I'm a survivor of Uncle Harry. You know what I mean? And it's like we have to take the shame and the stigma associated for the victims to talk about this stuff because we are heroes that we survived this stuff.
And if Aurora Avenue right by the Lowe's gets cleaned up within the next 6 months, I'll know these conversations really made good effort, or no, really impacted somebody that could do something.
I saw a prostitute on Aurora, a young woman that was on drugs last time I was in Seattle in that area. And it was just heartbreaking. She was like spazzing out on something horrible, but it was just heartbreaking. So
well, apparently there's a new taco truck that sets up right by the O'Reillys near the strip club, which was one of the hotbeds. The other hotbed's right by the Jack in the Box. And every time I drive by that corner, especially on a Thursday, Friday night, I think to myself, how sick are we as a society that we still need to go buy tacos while watching pretty much like the most destitute just be completely cracked out. I mean, it's literally dinner and a show for like $10. Mm-hmm. I actually think the most expensive thing on that corner is literally the tacos.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Noah, did you want to say anything before we say goodbye? Are you still on with us? Okay. I think we may have him on, but maybe he's not able to. I'm just going to try to unmute him real quick. It's really nice to see all your faces. Noah,
We did want to thank everybody. It's been very nice listening to different points of view and different concerns that different individuals have. So we wanted to thank everybody for their time and their perspective.
yeah, I appreciate your perspective. Okay, well then, Lovely, did you have anything to share before we end?
Don't you always end next year in the bombarded Jerusalem?
I'm sorry. Oh, the Jewish event, is that what you're talking about?
No, there's a common thing that when you're outside of Israel, you always claim that next year in the bombarded Jerusalem.
Right. I didn't hear you at first. Next year,
Yeah.
next year in Jerusalem.
We'll dance on top of
Yeah.
Al-Aqsa. When Mashiach comes, we'll all dance on top of Al-Aqsa.
And actually, there's our colleague was talking about how that even though they call it a mosque, apparently that was the third temple. For a year, they actually used it to sacrifice stuff. And who knew that now they're trying to build a fourth temple, not the third one.
Huh. Do you think the big religious center in Dubai is going to have any impact with that, or are all sides set on the Holy Mount?
I don't know. I mean, the question is, will they ever try to revise the third temple and making it Jewish again?
We're off topic a little.
I mean,
Yeah.
but
might be a little off topic. Just saying.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about animal sacrifices, right? And kids haven't been able to do it for like 2,000 years.
Actually, I don't know if it was just animals, because that culture didn't appreciate humans the same way.
Right.
No,
Actually, there were human sacrifices. But thank you, Jesse, so much for joining. Thank you.
Yeah.
For your
But
time.
yeah, thank you everybody for your time.
And Lovely, it doesn't appear like we were able to unmute you. I don't know why. I was just struggling there for a minute. It just wasn't working out. So glad you showed up. But I just loved this. I found this actually very supportive for talking about this subject, even if we got into human sacrifice in Jewish history. So
I mean, ancient Jewish history.
Ancient. Okay, I'm emphasizing the ancient. All right. Be well, everyone. I'm going to say goodbye and stop recording.
Thank you, Leo.